I will not delay and go ahead and call to order today the March 18, 2021 Transportation Coordinating Committee meeting for the Winston-Salem Urban Area MPO. And I will start by reading our Safer at Home statement. Due to the Safer at Home order issued by Governor Cooper, members of the Transportation Coordinating Committee are participating virtually. All members will vote by roll call. A member will be recognized, at which time the member will state his or her vote. At this time, I will ask our recording secretary, Kirk Erickson, to call the roll call by name, please.
Thank you, Tanique. And I'll just say, if anyone has just come into the meeting and doesn't hear me call their name, if they're a voting member, please let me know. Tanique?
Here.
Daryl?
Here.
Pat Ivy?
I'm here.
Kelly Garvin?
Here.
Lee?
Here.
Scott Buffkin? I think I saw Scott Buffkin on here. Megan Garner?
Here.
Scott Snow?
Here.
Scott Leonard?
Here.
Mark Kirsner?
Here.
Donna?
Here.
Did I miss any voting members? All right, Tanique, that sounds like we caught everyone.
Very good, thank you. And if you give me 1 second, let me find where I placed my agenda. All right, our first item will be public comments. Kirk, was there anyone that called in or stated that they had a public comment?
The only person's name I don't recognize on the attendance list is Brian Murphy. Brian, are you here for public comment, or are you with one of the jurisdictions?
Good morning. I'm with, or good afternoon. I'm with DOT. I'm actually presenting later in the agenda.
Okay, then Tanique, we don't have anyone for public comment.
Very good, thank you. All right, I will then move on to our action items for today. The first item will be the consideration of the February 18th, 2021 TCC meeting minutes. I hope everyone's had an opportunity to review the minutes. Does anyone have any comments to make, or would anyone like to make a motion for acceptance?
Scott Snow, motion to approve. Accept the minutes.
Thank you, Scott. Would anyone like to second that motion, please?
Pat Ivy, second.
Thank you, Pat. It has been properly moved and seconded. We can call the roll for the vote.
Tanique?
Yes.
Daryl?
Yes.
Pat voted yes. Kelly Garvin?
Yes.
Kirk votes yes. Lee?
Yes.
Scott Buffkin?
Yes.
Megan?
Yes.
Chris Jensen? Looked like Chris was in the meeting. Scott Snow?
Yes.
Scott Leonard?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Donna?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you, everyone. All right, we will move on to our next item, which is the consideration of the draft fiscal year 2021 through 2022 Unified Planning Work Program for the Winston-Salem Urban Area MPO. Kelly, I think this is you.
Yes, ma'am. Good afternoon, everybody. Let me fix my sound here. Can you all hear me good?
Yes.
Okay. As mentioned, the item before you is the consideration of the draft 2021-2022 Unified Planning Work Program for our NPO. All NPOs that have been designated as transportation management areas are required to develop an annual Unified Planning Work Program, or UPWP, in coordination with Federal Transit Administration. Each year, the NPO is required to develop and approve the UPWP for transportation and transit planning. The UPWP identifies what transportation and transit planning projects and work tasks will be completed during the fiscal year, and the estimated amount of federal and state highway and transit planning funds that will be used to complete the work and the tasks outlined. As part of this UPWP, there were 2 requests for studies. The Village of Clemens requested $50,000 for their bicycle and pedestrian study, and the City of Winston-Salem requested $150,000 to hire a consultant to ensure that our congestion management plan is being used effectively and efficiently in our area. Both studies or both plans will be, the village and the city will be responsible for the 20% match. Another change or update in this UPWP is that the City of Winston-Salem is also requesting an additional $100,000 for the Winston-Salem Transit Authority route study. This would amend the current PWP, so the fiscal year 2020 to 2021 PWP, bringing the total amount for that study to $200,000. The item is going out right now for public participation, and we recommend approving this item since it was reviewed at our last meeting, and staff will bring it back should we get any comments. I've included in your packet the UPWP for this fiscal year with the amendment, and the FY21-2022 UPWP also is included. I'm available for any questions that you may have.
All right, thank you very much, Kelly. Kelly has shared with us the UPWP for 2021 through 2022, in addition to an amendment to our current fiscal year's UPWP 2020 through 2021. Does anyone have any questions for Kelly?
Yeah, this is Daryl Wheeland. I do.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thanks. Kelly, so this is an amendment to 21, the current year, and this is the draft 22, right?
Right.
So, and forgive me because the agenda book is so thick, I don't want to, it ties up all my resources to move around in there, and I got it saved on my feature page here. Are there 2 resolutions, or in other words, one for the amendment for the current, and then another resolution, or it looks like it's
only one. Both are called out in that resolution, but I think it wouldn't be hard to make a second resolution if that's what's required. Okay, I mean,
it'd be cleaner if they were 2 separate, because it's 2 separate items, and the resolution kind of has to be attached to each. But for the 21, you're not changing anything in the PL or DA function.
Well, I'm not adding any DA funds. I am mostly just moving DA funds around.
Okay. I would prefer a separate resolution if you could. Yeah, that's not a problem. I just think, but a separate resolution would be cleanest for all purposes and such, to have just one resolution for that amendment and the other one for the 22.
So since this is an action item, then you prefer that we vote on them separately. So that's what it sounds like. So we can definitely do that, I'm sure. Are there any other questions for?
The vote maybe could be as one. I don't know if it requires 2 votes. Yeah, I'll leave that up to you. But yeah, 2 resolutions. Sorry about that.
Okay, no. I think, Daryl, since we're going to be sending it to you as 2 resolutions, it might be better if we vote on them separately.
Agreed.
So I will entertain motions, I guess, for the first action, which would be approval of the draft UPWP for fiscal year 2021 through 2022.
Move
Would anyone
approval.
like to? Okay. Who was that? I'm sorry.
That was Kirk.
Kurt. Thank you, Kurt. So it's been moved that we would accept the draft of the 2021 through 2022 Unified Planning Work Plan Program. Would anyone like to make a second?
Scott Snow, second.
Thank you, Scott. So it's been properly moved and seconded. Kirk, can you call the roll for the vote, please?
Yes. Tanique,
Yes.
Daryl,
Yes.
Pat,
Yes.
Kelly Garvin,
Yes.
Kirk voted yes. Lee,
Yes.
Scott Buffkin,
Yes.
Chris?
Yeah.
Megan?
Yes.
Scott Snow voted yes. Scott Leonard?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
And Donna?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you very much. All right, and then if we could have a motion for the second part of it would be for the adoption of the modifications to the current fiscal year 2020 through 2021 Unified Planning Work Plan, work program, I'm sorry. Would anyone like to make a motion to accept?
Mark Kirschner, so moved.
Mark, thank you.
Lee Rollins, second.
Thank you, Lee. So it has been properly moved and seconded that we would also adopt the changes to the fiscal year 2020 through 2021 UPWP. Kirk, can you call the roll for the vote, please?
Tanique,
Yes.
Daryl,
Yes.
Pat,
You get that?
did not.
Yes.
Kelly,
Yes.
Kirk votes yes. Lee voted yes. Scott Buffkin,
Yes.
Chris? Chris, are you there?
Yes.
Scott Snow voted yes, it looks like. Scott Leonard,
Yes.
Mark voted yes, and Donna,
Yes.
motion is unanimous.
Very good, everyone. Thank you. Thank you for indulging us and separating that. And Daryl for pointing that out for us. All right, we will move on to item number 4, which is consideration of the fiscal year 2020 through 2029 Metropolitan Transportation Improvement Program amendments and modifications for the Winston-Salem urban area MPO. Byron?
Good afternoon, everyone. The 2020-2029 Metropolitan Transportation Improvement Program is a listing of all the projects programmed for the Winston-Salem urban area. This document is a subset of the 2045 Metropolitan Transportation Plan and reflects projects programming included in the state's Transportation Improvement Program. As project schedules, funding, and program is modified, these changes are reflected in our Mtip. Included in your materials are project modifications, additions, and deletions, including various statewide project programming modifications, the addition of several projects, including Harmon Lane, South Cherry Street, and Depot Street sidewalk construction. These amendments were made available for the public to review between February 15th, 2021 and March 17th, 2021, per our public participation policy. No comments were received during that time. I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have on these amendments.
Thank you, Byron. Does anyone have questions for Byron? All right, hearing none, then would anyone like to make a motion to approve this item?
So moved, Pat Ivy.
Thank you, Pat.
Second, Donna.
Thank you, Donna. It has been properly moved and seconded. We would approve the amendments and modifications to the fiscal year 2020 through 2021 Mtip. Kirk, can you call the roll for the vote, please?
Tanique,
Yes.
Daryl,
Yes.
Pat voted yes. Kelly,
Yes.
Kirk votes yes. Lee,
Yes.
Scott Buffkin,
Yes.
Chris, Megan,
Yes.
Scott Snow,
Yes.
Scott Leonard,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
And
Donna voted yes. Motion passes unanimously.
Very good. Thank you, everyone. All right. Our next item is the consideration of a request to modify the Winston-Salem Urban Area MPO's, excuse me, Federal Functional Classification Network. Byron?
The federal functional classification of a roadway describes the current primary functional purpose of a roadway in relation to the larger area road network. Roadways are assigned one of 8 classifications based on its functionality, characteristics, levels of accessibility versus mobility. A roadway's functional classification is used to determine federal aid, roadway design elements, project prioritization, and programming. The Winston-Salem MPO established an application and review process to determine if facilities should be either upgraded or downgraded based on factors such as ADT, land use, connectivity, speed limit, widths, control of access, amongst other factors. Between November 23rd, 2020 and December 28th, 2020, the MPO held an open call for requests to modify the existing network. The Streets and Highways Subcommittee met on December 9th, 2021 to discuss the proposed request. The attached tables include the request and recommendations made by the committee. Included in there are several requests from Kernersville, as well as requests from the staff doing regular maintenance to the federal classification network. I'll be more than happy to answer any questions about this item.
Thank you, Byron. Does anyone have any questions for Byron? All right, hearing none, would anyone like to make a motion on this item, please?
Scott Leonard, move to approve.
Thank you, Scott. Can I get a second, please?
Donna Woodson, second.
Thank you, Donna. It has been properly moved and seconded. Kirk, can you please call the roll for the vote?
Tanique,
Yes.
Daryl,
Yes.
Pat,
Yes.
Kelly,
Yes.
Kirk votes yes. Lee,
Yes.
Scott Buffkin,
Yes.
Chris, Megan,
Yes.
Scott Snow,
Yes.
Scott Leonard voted yes. Mark,
Yes.
and Donna votes yes. Motion is unanimous.
Very good. Thank you, everyone. All right, just a few more. Our next item is the review of the Federal Transit Administration Formula Program, Section 5307 funding allocation for the Winston-Salem Urban Area fiscal year 2021, the program of projects and amendments to the 2020 through 2029 Mtip related to this item. This item relates to the funding, and I guess I'll cover this item until we get us a transit planner. But this item relates to the funding of the Section 5307 funds for operating and capital assistance Our urban area has received $5,218,153 for fiscal year 2021. And as most of you can recall, we've adopted a formula program of distribution in fiscal year 2017 or in calendar year 2017, where the funding is distributed in accordance with the percentages developed by FTA in Table 3A. Based upon the percentages in that table, the recommended funding would be distributed to Davidson County Transportation to receive a funding amount of $186,957, to the Piedmont Authority for Regional Transportation to receive $579,407, and then the Winston-Salem Transit Authority would receive $4,443,605. And we would also retain $55,000 to be used for the traditional job access and reverse commute type programs. So based upon that distribution and the meetings held with those agencies indicating that they can utilize those funds and how they intended to use those funds, we advertised a program of projects during the period of February 15th through yesterday, March 17th, which was a 30-day period that was open for the public to give comment. Additionally, a public hearing will be held at the Transportation Advisory Committee meeting this evening to give the public the opportunity to provide any additional feedback if they so desire. So at this time, we would ask the committee to consider the approval of the distribution of this funding and the amendment to the Mtip so that these agencies can apply for this funding through FTA. I will take any questions anyone has.
Move approval. This is Kirk.
Thank you, Kirk. Kirk has moved. Would anyone like to second that motion?
Pat Ivy?
Thank you, Pat. So it has been moved and seconded on this item. Kirk, can you please call the roll for the vote?
Tanique?
Yes.
Daryl?
Yes.
Pat voted yes. Kelly?
Yes.
Kirk voted yes. Lee?
Yes.
Scott Buffkin?
Yes.
Chris? Megan?
Yes.
Scott Snow?
Yes.
Scott Leonard?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
And Donna?
Yes.
Motion is unanimous.
Thank you very much. All right, we will move on to item number 7, which is the consideration of the Federal Transit Administration Section 5339 Bus and Bus Facilities Grant Program funding allocation for the Winston-Salem urban area fiscal year 2021, the programming of projects, and an amendment to the 2020 through 2029 Mtip. And I will cover that item also. This funding is the programming or is a formula program used to are being used to replace, rehab, and purchase buses and bus facilities. This funding is being recommended to be distributed to the Winston-Salem Transit Authority in the amount of $580,567 for our fiscal year 2021. WISTA has proposed to use the available funds to purchase Transaid vans and a support vehicle to replace aging fleet, and then the balance of the funds would be used for transit facility rehab projects and capital maintenance. The programming of projects was advertised for the period of February 15th through March 17th, where we advertised the utilization of those funds. A public hearing is also scheduled to occur at the Transportation Advisory Committee meeting today for this item, which will again provide the public another opportunity to provide any feedback. If this funding is approved, we're also requesting that it be updated in the Mtip so that WISTA can then apply to FTA for utilization of the funds. I will entertain any questions. If hearing none, would anyone like to make a motion?
Scott Snow, motion to approve.
Thank you, Scott. Would anyone like to second?
Megan Garner, second.
Thank you, Megan. So it has been moved and seconded. Kirk, can you call the roll for the vote, please?
Tanique,
Yes.
Daryl,
Yes.
Pat,
Yes.
Kelly,
Yes.
Kirk votes yes. Lee,
Yes.
Scott Buffkin,
Yes.
Chris,
Yes.
Megan voted yes. Scott Snow voted yes. Scott Leonard,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Donna.
Yes.
Motion is unanimous.
Very good. Thank you, everyone. And then we have one last item, which is a consideration of the request to hold a special meeting on April 15th. Typically, we would meet every other month. And so this is Kelly who will cover this item to explain why we're asking for an April meeting.
Yes, again, the reason for having a special meeting in April, we have a CMAQ deadline that is coming upon us in April, and we have to be able to submit those projects in April. So we would need to meet and adopt the projects that we intend to submit as an MPO to receive those funds. Unfortunately, we could not get the deadline to be postponed. And along with that, so we will be voting on that CMAQ item, and we would also be voting on the amendments, modifications made to the CTP. And I think we have an Mtip item that we're voting on as well. But the urgent matter is the CMAQ funds, for which the deadline is quickly approaching.
Thank you very much, Kelly. So we would ask that this body does vote to hold a special meeting. So if anyone would like to make a motion and for us to have a meeting on April 15th, 2021.
So moved.
And so moved.
Thank you, Pat. And I don't know who else said something that if you wanted to second.
Scott Buffkin, I'll second.
Thank you, Scott. So it has been moved and seconded that we would hold a special meeting on April 15th, 2021. And Kirk, if you will, and I guess the meeting would be held at the same time that we typically hold our meetings, which would be at 2:00.
All right,
You-
Tanique,
Yes.
Daryl,
Yes.
Pat voted yes. Kelly,
Yes.
Kirk votes yes. Lee,
Yes.
Scott voted yes. Chris,
Yes.
Megan,
Yes.
Scott Snow,
Yes.
Scott Leonard,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Donna.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Very good. Thank you. Look forward to seeing everyone next month. So to give you a preview of the items that you would be considering next month, we will start with our information items. So the first item, information item, is item number 9, which is a review of the fiscal year 2022 Federal Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality Call for Projects. And that's Victoria Bailiff.
Thanks, Tanique. We have CMAQ, which is Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality. It's a federal program that funds transportation projects and programs in air quality, non-attainment, and maintenance areas to aid in the achievement and maintenance of national standards for air quality pollutants. In North Carolina, the NCDOT is the administrator for the CMAQ program. Funding is apportioned to North Carolina based on population in non-attainment and maintenance areas of the state, and also based on the severity of the air quality problem. For fiscal year 2022, NCDOT has allocated $1,794,028 to the Winston-Salem MPO. 2 candidate projects were submitted for funding consideration this year. The city of Winston-Salem requested $920,000 for WISTA night, Saturday, and Sunday service, as well as $874,028 for bus replacement and capital items. Currently, the Office of Environmental Assistance and Protection is in the process of evaluating both projects to determine the annual pollutant reduction in kilograms. They use a series of computer models that estimate the average emissions for different types of highway vehicles. And since they're still working on the emissions data, we will not be able to give you specific numbers at this meeting, but we will have that data for you at the April meeting. If there are any questions, I can answer.
Very good, Victoria. Does anyone have any questions for Victoria on this item? All right. Well, thank you, Victoria. We will now move on to the next item, which is item number 10, review of amendments to the 2020 Comprehensive Transportation Plan for the Winston-Salem Urban Area MPO. And this is Ira that will cover it.
On January 21st, 2021, the Winston-Salem Urban Area MPO adopted the Comprehensive Transportation Plan update. The CTP is a multimodal long-range planning document which is not physically constrained and identifies the community's transportation vision up to 2045. Staff worked with VHB consultant firm on the update of this document, and as a state-required document, after our approval, this document was sent to the Transportation Planning Division of NCDOT for their review. Per their review, we have the following amendments and modifications that we are proposing to make to the CTP update plan. These changes to the plan will update the maps to follow the CTP 2.0 standards, including, as well as include project descriptions and summary need statements, as well as updated inventory map that reflects all these changes. This also updates the plan to reflect the most recent amendments to the state's Transportation Improvement Program, or STIP, on projects that are scheduled or identified in our area. I'll be more than happy to answer any questions about any of the amendments that are being submitted for public review. So the public review period for this item is March 12th, 2021 through April 11th, 2021.
All right. Does anyone have any comments or questions for Byron?
Byron's Mark Kirshner. I'm trying to flip through all the massive agenda you have here. Does this include the transit element as well, or is this just the highway element?
These are primarily highway, but there is, because we included an update to the project summaries, it is also including the public transit maps as well. But none of the projects are actually changing.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
All right, any other questions for Byron?
Tanique, this is Pat. I did have one quick question. I almost forgot about it. On the highway recommendations map and the facility types map, they are showing the new, it appears they're showing the new Macy Grove Road extension as a dotted line. Does that need to be shown as a solid line since it is now existing? I know it's a minor point, but I just thought I'd ask.
if it is existing, then we do need to have it reflected as existing in our plan.
Very good. And then one other thing, Byron, where that roadway connects to Highway 150, that is also on a new location, and it lines up with the future Piney Grove Road connector that you're also showing as a dotted line.
All right.
Just wanted to make sure it was accurate.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for that information. Pat, any other comments or questions? All right, hearing none. Since this isn't an update for the plan and it's coming next month, I'm sure that Byron will accept any other comments or findings that you all may have before our next meeting. All right, we will now move on to information item number 11, which is a review of the fiscal year 2020 through 2029 Mtip amendments and modifications for the Winston-Salem urban area MPO. Byron?
Again, the 2020-2029 Metropolitan Transportation Improvement Program is a list of all the projects programmed for the Winston-Salem urban area. This document is a subset of the 2045 Metropolitan Transportation Plan and reflects projects programmed included in the state's Transportation Improvement Program. As project schedules, funding, and programming is modified, these changes are reflected in our Mtip. Included in your materials are the modifications, additions, and deletions, including various statewide program modifications, as well as delayed construction on Salisbury Ridge Road. Per the public participation policy, the public review for this is being held between March 12th, 2021 and April 17th, 2021. At the next MPO meeting, we will provide any comments for this item. And I'll be happy to answer any questions.
All right. Any questions for Byron? All right, hearing none, we will move on to our information items. Oh, additional information items, which is a review of our 2021 federal certification report. This is Kelly and Suzette Morales.
Yes, ma'am. Let me find my place. I'm sorry. Okay.
Kelly, we can't hear you.
Hello?
Okay, we can hear you now.
Oh, okay. Federal Highway, in coordination with Federal Transit Administration, are required to certify that the planning process is being carried out in accordance with all federal statutes, and they're required to do that for every transportation management area, which we are one of, at least every 4 years. As a result of that, we had our certification review in December of 2020 with Federal Highway, Federal Transit Administration, and MPO staff. Included in your packet is the report with the findings of that evaluation or that review. With us today, we have, I think Suzette Morales should be on the line to provide us with any comments that are specific to that report.
All right.
Hey, Suzette. I don't see her on the line.
Yeah, I don't see Suzette available either. Oh, no, I do see. Suzette, you're muted.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
We can now. Thank you. I think we just lost you again.
Okay, how about now?
Now we can hear you, yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. For some reason, my calendar showed 2:30 for the meeting, so I'm really, really, really sorry. And I was like, where's the link? And so I started freaking out. So I'm really sorry.
No problem. Your timing is perfect. We just got to you.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yes.
All right, give me 1 second. Okay, so yeah, so at the beginning of December, we meant to have the certification review. So every 4 years, the certification review is done to ensure that the MPO has met federal requirements. So with their planning process and just the way that the MPO does its business. So we did first a desk review, which involved basically, as the public should be able to see the work that's being done online and also by requests to the MPO. So if there's something you want to know, you should be able to easily just ask the MPO. So we did our desk review based on that. Usually, previously it was, we would go for like 3 days and there'd be all these documents that you'd have to like be prepared to show all that, but we've cut it down to be not as cumbersome. So basically everything that we reviewed was based on what we saw online or what we requested, and then to see if requirements were met that way. So we did that, and then if we had any questions, we would ask those questions during our certification review. The certification review, it took place in 2 half days. So going on different topics that the federal highways as well as FTA, because it's a joint review, topics that we felt that were maybe more risk-based, more risk than other topics. So for example, the one topic is the boundary area. So the boundary is something that's been established, for a while. It's been at least 10 years since the last census. So the boundary is pretty there. So that's not a risk topic. So therefore we don't discuss that. But something like maybe the UPWP or the congestion management plan, if we feel like those are topics that are of concern, then we go into more detail and talk about that during the certification review. So it all culminated into a report. And I believe the MPO staff has provided everyone with that report. I believe it's on your website. But the report is just a result of everything that we've done. And so those topics that you see on the report are topics that we felt that may have been areas of risk. So in the end, if we discovered that it wasn't a risk, we still put it in the report because that was an area that we discussed. In the report, you'll also see areas that we felt were recommendations or commendations or findings where the MPO didn't meet requirements. So there wasn't anything like that for this review. There were only recommendations and commendations. And when you look at the report, it shows, it initially has just like the table of what those recommendations were and those commendations were. And I will go over a few of them, but if there are any that you feel, or if you want to go more into it, you can look into the report, but I'll only go over a few of the recommendations and the commendations. So let me just pull that up. Are there any questions for me so far while I pull this up? Okay. Did you want me to share my screen or just read through it, Kelly?
We can scroll down since we have the Baron can probably scroll down since we have the report, and you can just go from there if that's comfortable for you.
Okay, yeah, I mean, if you want to, you can go to the table. So I guess which would start on page 2 officially of the report.
There you go.
Yeah. So if you see those table, that first table is the previous findings. So during our desk review and our meeting with the MPO, we determine if those previous findings have been met or if they haven't been met and they need to be further, how do you say, I don't know, just continued if you guys need to continue working on that. So one of them is freight planning. So that one was a recommendation from the previous certification review 4 years ago, but it was found that that one hadn't been fully met. So it was recommended that continued. So it recommended that the MPO continue to involve the freight community in the planning process and in whatever planning products it has. And then if we go to 1.2, which is current findings, if you can scroll down. Okay, yeah, there are several of them, but one of the, I'll go through a few. Let's see. So one topic area was the UPWP, and so the finding was that the self-certification didn't have the 2 planning factors. So that's a pretty easy change, which is the old certification, which you guys do annually. It didn't have the 2 newest planning factors. So NCDOT has already provided you guys with the updated one, and you can use that for the next self-certification review. So that one's pretty much been done. There was one for environmental mitigation and planning linkages. So that one, I think, was the topic of greater concern, which is ensuring that the environmental features in the MTP, you have to show where there could be potential impacts for a project. So basically you would overlay the environmental features and all the projects to see if there are any areas that you should look further into. So the recommendation for that was to involve more of the agencies, just to ensure that you're minimizing any impact. So it's better to have that dealt with before you start going into more detailed NEPA. So figuring out to see if there's any mitigation you can do beforehand would be just beneficial overall. So you guys had pretty good commendations from in terms of EJ, environmental justice. The environmental justice or civil rights specialist that we have, Melanice DeVance, she thought that the MPO did a really great job with their public participation techniques. One of the things that that we all really liked was how you guys ensured that you were targeting the EJ population, especially with your pedestrian master plan. So looking at those zip codes and ensuring that people in those areas who fit the EJ characteristics have been aware of any plans and projects that are going to be in their area. So that was a commendation for the MPO. But yeah, spend time, reading through if you're interested. And either way, even though there are these recommendations, the FHW and FTA will make sure to work with the MPO staff in order so that these recommendations have been, so there's a timeline for when we recommend when we recommend the recommendations should be met. So we'll make sure to work with the MPO and check it halfway to that timeline to see if there's anything that we can do to ensure that those recommendations are met. But that's pretty much it for me. Are there any questions? Okay, thank you, Kelly. And Kelly, did you have anything, or did you already say about the project or about the process?
No, I gave it to be processed, so I think we're good.
Okay. All right, thank you, Tanique. I really appreciate you giving me the time to talk about the certification review.
Thank you for sharing this information. Did anyone have any questions or comments for Suzette or Kelly? Not hearing none. Well, again, Suzette, thank you, and we did appreciate the shorter schedule for the review, and we'll continue to work on those areas that you all identified that we need to work on.
Thank you. And we had another certification review recently with Greensboro. Actually, that just finished last week. And one of the headquarters staff for Federal Highways participated. And she wanted to know what was something that the MPO liked about this certification versus the previous one. So they certainly said that they liked that it was shorter, but they're like, is there opportunity for us to make it that we have virtual in the future too, because it's a lot easier. So anything that you guys feel like you liked about the certification review or you thought could be improved, then let us know so that we can make it better for the next one.
Very good. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
I think we all appreciated the virtual a little bit. The challenge is we're doing so much virtually, we don't know what we want to continue to do virtually and not. At least that's how I feel right now. All right. Let's see. We will go on to our next item, which is a presentation, which is a review of the North Carolina Department of Transportation Target for Safety Performance Measures. Victoria and Brian Murphy.
Yes, thanks, Tanique. Per the Federal Highway Administration's Highway Safety Improvement Program, the NCDOT has to coordinate the establishment of safety targets with the MPOs in the state. And in accordance with federal guidelines, the review of progress towards meeting these goals must be tracked and recorded annually in the Highway Safety Improvement Plan annual report. At the end of August every year, the NCDOT sets targets for the state safety performance measures, and MPOs have 180 days to either adopt the state's targets or set their own. This year, on January 21st, the Winston-Salem TAC approved a resolution of support for the state's targets, but the TAC expressed interest on the tracking of this safety data. So we have Brian Murphy with us today. He's a safety planning engineer for the NCDOT, and he'll be making a presentation on safety performance measures and tracking.
Good afternoon. This is Brian Mayhew. I'm the State Traffic Safety Engineer with NCDOT. And Brian Murphy, like you mentioned, is also here with us today, our Safety Planning Engineer. And as mentioned, we're going to go over briefly just some traffic safety data trends and touch on the performance measures just briefly. So I'll go over some statewide data trends first, and then Brian Murphy's going to review some data trends that are more specific to your MPO. So the statewide data trends that we'll go over today will range from our population trends and vehicle miles traveled, and we'll also go through many trends that directly relate to the performance measures and a few others as well. So one important thing as background is to understand that in 2019, North Carolina did adopt a strategic highway safety plan. And this is a broad-based safety plan that covers both infrastructure as well as education and enforcement and encouragement. It's not just an NCDOT plan, it is for the state as a whole. One of the most important things established in that plan is a goal for North Carolina, and that is to reduce all fatalities injuries by half by 2035 and moving towards zero by 20. That goal is what informed our SAMs and many decisions that we make within NCDOT on how to adjust our safety program to try to meet that goal. Population in North Carolina is increasing. No news flash there. I'm sure you guys are experiencing the population growth in Winston-Salem area as well. This does matter in terms of meeting our safety goals. As population increases, primarily in the urban areas, it does put additional demand on those roads and facilities, and often we can see an increase in crashes and fatalities as population goes up. And so for a safety program to be successful and achieve those fairly significant goals of reducing fatalities and serious injuries by half, then we have to acknowledge that we have to do more work to help over accommodate the effect of the population increase. VMT is a common metric of activity in the state. This is vehicle miles traveled. The red part at the bottom of the graph is VMT in rural areas in the state. And as you can see, it's pretty flat. It does not go up and down by a whole lot each year. So, that is suggesting that our travel in rural areas is pretty stable. Yep, most of our fatalities do occur in rural areas, but VMT in our urban areas is going up fairly significantly. And this is a trend that has been in place since the Great Recession back in 2007 and 2008. That's likely to continue as well. Of note is the green bar on the far right. That is 2020, and that is estimated VMT. That's not a complete number yet, but that does reflect the impact of COVID. You see how it's a pretty big decrease, and that most of that decrease occurred in the spring, in that March, April, May time frame. But you'll be able to see that it does not necessarily correlate with some of the other safety data that we're going to share. Fatalities. This is a key metric for North Carolina. You go ahead and see to the far right in 2020, fatalities 1,649. So our VMT dropped significantly in 2020, but our fatalities rose by over 11%. So our trend, if you look from around 2011 through 2020, is a pretty steady increase in fatalities statewide. So if our goal is to reduce them by half by 2035, currently the state is trending in a direction that will not allow us to meet that goal. In fact, the 1,649 fatalities in North Carolina last year is the highest since 2007 and one of the highest since the early 1970s. So it is definitely an area of concern. Serious injuries in North Carolina. This graph is a little different looking, but that's because we had a definition change of what a serious injury is in North Carolina. This was to meet a federal requirement for all states to be standard on how they report serious injuries. And because of that definition change, it makes it look like we've had a rapid increase in serious injuries. But if you look from 2017 through 2020, you do see we've had an increase in serious injuries, but it's not as dramatic as our increase in fatalities. Bicycle, pedestrian fatalities, and serious injuries. So this graph has combined both fatalities and serious injuries for bicycle and pedestrian-related events. Unfortunately, we're seeing a pretty steady increase in pedestrian fatalities statewide. This reflects a nationwide trend as well, although this trend is generally more pronounced in the southern states and definitely is in North Carolina as well. So 276 pedestrian and bicycle fatalities in 2020. Bicycle fatalities are pretty stable in North Carolina, between maybe 20 and 30 on average each year. There's not been much change in those, fortunately, but pedestrian fatalities are increasing steadily. Almost all of the increase in pedestrian fatalities is in urban areas. There's not much change in rural areas. Many of the pedestrian fatalities are occurring on our busier roads, such as arterials, multi-lane roads, and many of those fatalities are also occurring at night. So that's some of the trends that we're seeing and that we're definitely trying to pay more attention to. And with that, Brian Murphy, well, no, I think we got one more slide, right, Brian?
Yep, that's right.
There we go. A little bit of lag today, but so reported crashes in North Carolina program focuses directly on, because many of these are very minor events, but it is still something that we monitor. As you can see, there's a lot of crashes in North Carolina, and it's been increasing steadily over time. But of note is in 2020, the total crashes dropped by almost 50,000, and that's due to the decrease in VMT and the decrease. Crashes decreased dramatically and travel decreased. So this is not a normal year. It's going to take some time to kind of figure out all the impacts of COVID. But the main message is our fatalities and serious injuries from a state perspective are not trending in the direction that's going to allow us to meet our adopted goal. So with that, Brian Murphy is going to go over some very similar information specific to the MPO.
All right, thanks, Brian. Yeah, I'm going to go over many of the same metrics that Brian Mayhew just went over with you, but going to kind of share some of the trends as they relate specifically to the Winston-Salem MPO boundary. First of those being vehicle miles traveled, and I'll spend a little bit more time on this graph just because all the subsequent graphs will be set up similarly. So the statewide trends will always be in red there, and then the trends specifically for Winston-Salem MPO will be in blue. And so, yeah, VMT, as Brian Mayhew mentioned, is a level of, or a good measure of activity within a boundary, MPO or state. Here we see that, the state VMT increased by about 20% over the last 10 years, and about the same increase in your MPO boundary as well. That certainly does play a role in the opportunity for crashes. Obviously, the more vehicles on the road, the more opportunity that you have for collisions, and that you see the results of that as well. Total reported crashes. So if we look at the statewide in the last 10 years, we've gone from about 240,000 to about 320,000. And then just within the MPO boundary, we've gone from about 9,000 to over 16,000. So almost doubled crashes in the last, just the last 10 years here within the MPO boundaries. Fatal crashes, and as we get into some of these measures that have fewer values, fewer samples, you will see the numbers move up and down a little bit more just because of the lower frequencies there. You will see more variability from year to year. But here we see, statewide trends increasing. Certainly, if you put a trend line through that, you'll see that the MPO trends are increasing as well. And you see that it kind of fluctuates from 30 to 50 fatals per year. Serious injury crashes. So I'll remind you again of that definition change. But if you look at kind of those trends over the last 10 years, so statewide numbers have about doubled. If you look at the trends for your MPO, they've 50 to over 150 have about tripled. So certainly some moving in the wrong direction there. Certainly some concerning trends there. And then non-motorized fatal and serious injury crashes. Again, think bicycle and pedestrian when you see that term. That'll show up in some of the performance measures that we get into a little bit later. But again, think bicycle and pedestrian. So again, you see a good bit of variation there in that number. So seeing values anywhere from 7 per year to 32. So. But again, no matter how you look at that, from a national perspective, statewide perspective, and municipal perspective, it's that's certainly a growth area from a safety perspective. Pedestrian crashes. So again, another, we talked about that was kind of an increasing trend throughout the nation, the state, the MPO boundary. You certainly see that on display here as well. So, 45 crashes in 2010 to 120 last year in 2019. So certainly a good increase there as well. And you're seeing that at the state level as well. Bicycle crashes, so fewer values here, so certainly the numbers are kind of jumping around a little bit more. Statewide perspective, those have been kind of pretty stable the last few years, maybe decreasing slightly. But you'll see, obviously, in your MPO boundary, they were stable for a while, and in the last few years, there's been a good bit of an increase there in bicycle crashes. And then I'll kind of close the section on a couple of slides just related to something that gives you some perspective of where your crashes and fatal crashes and serious injury crashes are occurring within the MPO boundary. So you see the municipalities listed there. Obviously, no shock that Winston-Salem has the majority of the reported crashes there. But once you start looking at fatal and serious injury crashes, you'll see that rural bucket as a good bit as well. And rural here just means outside of a municipal boundary. So I know there's a lot of different ways to define rural, but here it's just outside of a municipal boundary. And so, Brian Mayhew mentioned this earlier, but in the rural environment, we do see overall a lot more fatal and serious injury type crashes just because of the nature of those situations. So. And then a couple of ways to look at that, again, just looking at reported crashes in a little bit more of a graphical sense. So obviously Winston-Salem there makes up the biggest area. So of course has the most crashes as well. And then looking at that from a fatal crash perspective as well. And this is, again, looking at data from 2010 to 2019. So kind of a 10-year period there, just to give you some perspective of where these crashes are occurring geographically within your MPO boundary. And with that, I'm going to switch gears a little bit and give a little bit more background on safety performance measures. I know you guys have kind of been through this process recently of adopting the state's metrics, so I'll go through that fairly quickly. But these slides will be available. Obviously, I think you actually already have most of these slides. So this will be reference information if you need it. And then, of course, our contact will be here as well. So if there's any questions about, trends or performance measures, please don't hesitate to reach out on that. So a little bit of background on safety performance measures. So MAP 21 and FAST Act, these federal transportation funding acts, required state DOTs and MPOs to set targets for 5 Highway Safety Improvement Program, or HSIP, safety performance metrics. And you'll see those 5 metrics there kind of in the center of the screen. So it's really looking at the number and rate of fatalities, the number and rate of serious injuries, and then the number of non-motorized, again, bicycle pedestrian fatalities and serious injuries. A couple of things about the measures is that they're based on 5-year rolling averages, and these things are prescribed to us by FHWA. So they're telling every state to do these exactly the same. So in that way, these items are very prescriptive. So they're based on 5-year rolling averages. They're for calendar years. So a metric will be for example, you guys just passed the 2021 calendar year metrics, and they're established annually. So this is obviously, you guys have been through this process a few times. This is something that we'll go through annually. And then just a note about the reporting dates here. The state has to report theirs on August 31st with the Highway Safety Improvement Program report. And then the MPO, of course, has to do theirs by the end of February. So how are the targets set? Well, this is an area where we do have some flexibility. So it's really up to each state and each MPO. And the MPO can either adopt the state's methodology, or they can come up with their own. So specifically, how are these targets set in North Carolina? Brian May mentioned this earlier in this talk. They're really coming out of our strategic highway safety plan, and our strategic highway safety plan is really that it's a diverse group of stakeholders that went through a collaborative process to look at an approach to how can we positively impact safety in our state. And this group was made up of state, regional, and local partners. There were MPO and RPO representatives on that team. There's public and private partners, and then, of course, the 4 E's there as well. So the education, enforcement, engineering, and emergency services. But again, it's really looking at that collaborative approach to reducing fatalities and serious injuries on our roadways. And as Brian Mayhew mentioned, the goal that came out of that plan was to reduce fatalities and serious injuries by half by the year 2035, moving towards zero by 2050. And this is what was used as the basis for the state level target setting. And I'm going to skip through this slide and explain it a little bit more graphically. So obviously we know our history. We know our history for fatal crashes. We can calculate, those 5-year averages as FHWA prescribes as far as how they want these reported. And we know based on our goal that came out of the Strategic Highway Safety Plan where we want to be in 2035 to meet that goal. And so if we know where we are now, we know where we want to be in 2035, we can do some math to tell us at any point, where we should be along that line at any point in time in order to be able to meet that goal. And so that's really how the performance measures and those targets that we adopt every year are set. So that was a little bit of background of kind of how they're set. I want to mention quickly that we did go through an assessment. And so FHWA will determine whether a state DOT has met or made significant progress towards meeting those safety targets. We had our first assessment early last year, and those were for calendar year 2018 targets. And just a reminder, again, FHWA will not directly assess the MPO progress towards meeting these targets, but obviously if we're to meet these targets at the state level, we're kind of all in this together. And so based on FHWA's review, North Carolina has not met or made significant progress towards achieving those performance targets. And the numbers are there just for completeness, but you'll see a lot of no's in those target achieved and better than baseline columns there. And I've put the statewide numbers there and the Winston-Salem numbers as well. And so you see a lot of no's, and eventually in today, did not meet or make significant progress there as determined by FHWA. And a lot of that has to do with how we set that goal. Obviously, that's a very aggressive goal that's set at the state level. All right, so talked about the background with safety performance measures and the assessment. Quickly, you guys have kind of already been through this process for setting your 2021 safety performance measures. So I'll go through this just very quickly. Obviously, the state values are there. You're more interested in your MPO measures and targets. And the top half of the screen there really has your performance in each of those HSIP safety performance target measure categories. So fatalities, fatality rate, serious injuries, serious injury rate, and then the non-motorized fatality and serious injuries. And then, based on that, you'll see your 2021 target. And again, you guys have recently gone through that process, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this at this point. Did want to mention a couple of resources that are available. Again, these links are in your packet, so if you want more information on kind of performance measures in general and how those are set, there's several links there. There's also a link to our webpage where we have a good bit of information broken down by MPO boundary, good bit of crash data broken down there. And then also, again, this is not meant to really be read as a slide because it's very busy, but it does have a good number of links there that gives you a taste of some of the information that's available out there. I'll just mention a couple of those. One would be all of our spot safety or our safety funded projects are all mapped and available online, and you can kind of see the status of each one of those and click on those and see more information. Another one that is particularly relevant in this particular conversation, all of our fatal and serious injury crashes are also mapped, and that's also served up as a web service. And if you click on those crashes, again, you can see more information about maybe what was involved in those types of crashes. So just wanted to mention those. And I think with that, there's our contact information for Brian Mayhew and myself, and we'll be glad to take any questions.
Thank you, Brian and Brian. and Victoria. Does anyone have any questions? In case you all don't recall, we asked for this information to come in response to a request made by one of our TAC members in reference to the item and the goals that were being adopted. And so this information will also be presented to our TAC committee so that they can give us further guidance on how they want us to bring further data to them as related to our targets and if we are meeting them and what that means and how it relates to project selections and things like that. All right, I hear no questions. So thanks again for the presentation, guys. And thank you, Victoria.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Welcome.
All right, we will move through the rest of our agenda. I'm sorry, I had to find it again. So staff reports, we'll kind of tag on those rather quickly so that we can get a little break before the TAC meeting. NCDOT Division 9, Pat?
Tonight, nothing specifically. My report is self-explanatory unless anybody has any questions.
All right. Any questions for Pat? Okay. The Winston-Salem Urban Area MPO Transportation Project updates. Kelly?
Nothing really beyond what's in the report. Some of our projects, some projects have started to move forward. If you have any updates on new projects, please share that with me so that I can update on the spreadsheet.
Okay, Kelly, you may want to move a little closer to your mic. You're drifting in and out.
I'm sorry, can you hear me now?
We can hear you a little bit. Just thought I'd share that with you for the next meeting. NCDOT Transportation Planning Update, Daryl?
Sure, just two there, and they can be found on page 357 and 358 of the PDF of the agenda package. First one is a new traffic survey group, which is a unit of the Transportation Planning Division. It's on the website, and you can find traffic counts and other information along those lines there. And the second item is the U.S. Census Bureau is proposing some standards and changes, and it's detailed there in the newsletter. So that's all I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Daryl, any questions? Okay. Let's see, Piedmont Triad Regional Council of Governments update. I don't think Carter was on this call. So Forsyth County OEAP Air Quality update. Was Carrie on this call? No, okay. Bicycle and pedestrian facility projects update, Matthew?
Thank you, Dee. I don't have anything for this month.
Very good, thank you. The Winston-Salem Transit Authority update, Donna?
I have nothing to add for the meeting today. If any questions, I'll be happy to answer. Thank you.
Thank you. And as I'm moving through, if anyone has questions, please jump in. The Piedmont Authority for Regional Transportation part update?
Nothing additional to add, Tanique.
Very good, thank you. Davidson County Transportation, Richard?
Yes, ma'am, thank you. We are planning to relaunch our deviated fixed routes on Monday, April the 5th. We've been doing dial-a-ride services through the whole COVID pandemic, so now we're going to relaunch our routes.
Okay. Very good. It's good news, right?
It is.
Feels like getting back to normal. All right, Title VI compliance update, Marlene?
Thank you, Tanique. Nothing to update at this moment.
Okay. And the MPO calendar of activities, Byron?
Nothing to add.
All right, and ethics liaison, Kurt?
I have nothing to add, Tanique.
Very good. Okay, so our next meeting is scheduled for April 15th as we chose to accept and adopt, and that will be at 2:00. And of course, we invite everyone to come to the TAC meeting, which follows at 4, or is it 4:15?
4:15.
So is there any other item for this committee?
Tonight, this is Pat. I've got a quick question for Kelly.
Sure.
Kelly, I think Jeff Turner had reached out to you a couple of weeks ago about adding getting MPO approval for a safety project that the Board of Transportation had approved. I think that was HS 2009A, and they're requiring board MPO approval for all those so that before we can let those projects to contract, and they want them awarded before July 1. Was that added to this agenda? I couldn't find it anywhere. Or what is our plan for that? Do you remember?
I think that was adopted last meeting. I remember having that conversation between myself, Jeff, and Mike Stanley, and Byron included that in his item last meeting. I think that was adopted last meeting.
Perfect. Was that included in the resolutions that came out?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm. All right, any other questions? And Pat, we can send that to you if we can pull it up and send it to you after our meeting this evening.
If that would not be trouble, that would be appreciated because I'm not sure if I can find it.
Yeah, we'll find it and send it on to you.
If she can just resend the resolutions, that'll be great.
I can do that.
Thank you so much, guys.
No problem. All right, well, are there any other comments? Hearing none, we actually went for a very long time this time. So thank you all for indulging us and sticking around. And I move that we be adjourned.
We agree.
Everyone, meeting's adjourned. Everyone have a great evening, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.